Hello, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. That's a strange order for me to start that in. Welcome to this session on the one great question that great leaders ask in every meeting. This is part of my Leading Like an Exec, Thinking Like an Exec series. My goal here is to help you think like that leader that I know that you are capable of being. We'll give folks a moment to join in, but if you're watching the replay, stick with me. Today, we're diving into a really simple but absolutely game changing question when it comes to executive presence, your executive reputation. And we are going to get there in just a few minutes. But first, just let me reintroduce myself in case you're new around here. But for those of you who know me and just listen along for a moment, I'm Tony Collis. I'm an executive coach. I specialize in the women in the tech space. I'm also a board advisor, a former tech executive myself, and I help brilliant women just like you be strategic, be more visible, be the influential leaders that I know you're capable of being, but just aren't seen as. My work is all about shifting the perception of us as leaders, making sure you are the credible leader that you are, but being recognized for it, whether you're at the VP level, aspiring to it, the C suite, the boardroom, the CEO. This series, Thinking Like an Exec, is my behind the scenes look at what it actually takes to go from wanting to be an exec to being that high performing strategic leader who is steering the room without dominating it, who's increasing her influence, all with today's one question. So, if you've ever implemented one of the shifts that allows you to be seen and taken more seriously, I bet things are landing differently, right? So today, my goal is to take what we've actually been talking about for a couple of weeks now. We've done several of these, and we're going to turn the dial up. We're going to be asking that question that's going to make sure that you rewire how everybody perceives you and your leadership. One of the things I see regularly in my coaching practice is amazing, high performing women, self selecting audience. I know, like you come to me because you're high performing, but something's not quite going right. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you need a sounding board. It does get lonely at the top, but you're smart, you're capable, you're trusted. Showing up prepared on top of things, helpful, but still getting passed over on the stretch projects, the promotions, the influential pieces. If that's you, pop in the comments and do a thumbs up or maybe a sad face thumbs up, okay? Why? What's going on here? Well, we're answering questions. We are potentially asking questions, but we're not steering the conversation with how we're answering questions and asking questions. The women I work with, they're contributing when they start working with me, but they're not shaping. Part of the journey I think I take almost all my clients on is moving from contributing to shaping. And by the way, this applies to CEOs as well. I coach CEOs, and sometimes I feel like you're contributing, but you're not shaping. And the job of a CEO, in my opinion, is to shape. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you asked a question in a meeting that changed the direction of that conversation? Are you the person others turn to have a decision when and how it's made? Like, are you the person that people turn to after the decision is made to implement, or are you the person that's turned to make the decision in the first place? Are you involved at the decision point at the table, or you're at the table, but you're only brought on board as the decision is being made or afterwards? Where do you sit? Again, pop in the comments and let me know. Let me just make sure I've got the comments up here. I'd love to hear from you. Is this resonating with you so far? Where do you sit? Are you brought in for the decision making? Or maybe you think you're in the decision making, but you don't really seem to have any influence. Or are you then turned to as the reliable person who'll get stuff done? The difference between being seen as a doer, responsible, reliable, will get stuff done, which is what we talked about 2 weeks ago, and being as a strategic leader is the most important piece. It's not that you're not smart enough or not senior enough or haven't worked hard enough. It's because for whatever reason, you're solving problems instead of framing the solutions, instead of framing the questions that are going to make sure the solutions are aiming in the right direction. Now, I'm a huge believer, before I go any further, today is all about questions, asking the right question specifically. And I'm a huge believer in this, but I'm also a very big advocate of be the solutions person, not the problem person. And I talk about this a lot with clients. when they are just too questiony, and I was one of those, we just question, question, question. We are viewed as a problem person. We're always bringing up problems rather than bringing up solutions. So I do want you to have the mindset of be the solutions person, answer questions more than ask. But this is the one exception to that. The question we're going to get into today is the one exception. This is the question that is actually going to get everybody to the right solution and is so incredibly important. Because there are times when you're answering when you should be asking. And I get it. You've been rewarded your entire career for having the answer, for being helpful, for saving the day. But as an executive, you don't get promoted for having all the answers. You get promoted for asking the right questions and steering the ship in the right direction. Because the right question reframes the problem everyone else is missing, surfaces the risks that no one's talking about without being the have you thought about, which is what I was. Have you thought about problem, problem, problem? I was thinking of all these edge cases, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, she's got good points, but she's exhausting. No, the right question surfaces that risk and makes it so obvious that it's the one risk rather than all these other ones that feel important but aren't really. And thirdly, the right question uncovers that smarter path forward. And when you do that consistently, people stop seeing you as a person who gets stuff done and start seeing you as a person who guides what gets done. That's the real influence. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if this is resonating with you, if you can hear me, if you're like, yep, I want to be this person. I want to be the person who has that reputation for getting to the finish line without just taking on all the responsibility of getting it done. I want to be at the table more. I'd love to hear from you. Because here's the part that really gets to me, and maybe lands for you too. Most of the women I work with have spent years building a reputation as reliable, competent, indispensable. But in the room where it really counts, the promotion conversations, the cross functional decisions, the strategic planning, they're still not being seen as leaders to bet on. And it's not because they're missing skills. It's because they're not being noticed for the strategic brain that they already have. Because meetings, they're not just for updates. In fact, I hate meetings or updates. Meeting updates, like meetings that are just about updating, should just be banned. In my opinion, they're a waste of time. I have very strong opinions about that. They have their place, but I think updates should be asynchronous personally. But great meetings are a stage for strategic thinking, are a stage for exploration. So it's where your leadership visibility should be happening. If you're not intentionally shaping how you show up in that space, and by the way, that doesn't just apply upwards, which is obviously the focus of what we're talking about today. It also applies downwards. Are you strategically showing up with your team? If you're not intentionally shaping that, no matter how good you are, you'll stay in the background. You'll be that person who, when she does raise her voice, everybody just kind of goes, ugh. Or worse, you start raising your voice because nobody listens to you. Here's the truth. No one tells you. You cannot overwork your way into being seen as strategic. In fact, the more overworked you are, the less strategic you are, and it will be noticed. They'll think you're great, but not strategic. You can't checklist your way into executive perception. You have to shift how you lead conversations. And yes, you can lead even when there's a CEO in the room and you're not the CEO. That's what today is about one question, simple question that means that people change how they view you. So if this is hitting home, click yes in the comments, click yes, type yes in the comments. I want to make sure this is the starting point that we're all at. I want to make sure we're all on the same page at this point. Okay. I am getting a few thumbs up, so it's good. We're on the same page. I'm loving this so far. Okay, let's talk about this one question that I keep going on about. It's this. You're gonna be like, oh my God, really? That's it? The question that I want you to write down. What problem are we actually trying to solve? What problem are we actually trying to solve? It sounds so simple, right? Almost too simple. But let's break down why this works and why it makes you sound instantly more strategic. And I was just telling a brand new client this today. She's come to me because she freezes, she clams up in executive meetings. She has tried to speak up and she feels like it falls flat or she sounds like an idiot. People dismiss her. And then she gets like upset that she's not spoken up. And I actually gave her this question today to try at her meeting this afternoon because she needs something where she doesn't have to think. just to get out of that space of freezing. And not because when we're freezing, when we're clammed up, when we're feeling anxious, our IQ literally drops and we can't think as well. So we've got to do the work to undo that mindset that's like, don't speak up, don't speak up, don't speak up. You look like an idiot. That's like going on in her head, in all of our heads, by the way, totally been there. The ones where we apologize as we open our mouths for how dare we open our mouths, right? If she can find a phrase where she can say something that's going to get good recognition, but at the same time, she doesn't have to think too much about it, but it still has a positive impact. We can start retraining her brain to not panic. And then 3 weeks of doing this, I've not yet had this work. If somebody does this every day for 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, she will suddenly have an IQ hit. Like she'll stop panicking and her brain will kick up a gear and she'll start problem solving in these. And actually, this is still the best question to ask. What problem are we actually trying to solve? Because when we do this, what we're saying is be more strategic, everybody. One of my clients, a simply brilliant engineering leader, started using this question. And within 1 week, her VP, her boss, told her, you've completely changed the way I see you in meetings. Just 1 week, right? Because in most meetings, most people are talking about solutions. Should we launch this feature? Should we reorg the team? Should we add more budget? Should we cut the budget? Should we cut the team? It's solutioning. But if you zoom out, and this is part of what I also teach with job hunting, is zooming out and getting that big picture. Most people haven't aligned on the problem. They think they have, but they've forgotten it. And without clarity on the problem, you make bad decisions. You chase noisy metrics or vanity metrics. You burn time and budget solving for the wrong things. I would love you to pop a pair of eyeballs in the chat if you've ever been in a meeting where everyone just jumped into solution mode before clarifying the problem. I don't think I've yet to have a meeting where this isn't the case. Pair of eyeballs, drop them in the chat for me if this is resonating with you. So when you ask, what problem were you actually trying to solve? You do a few high impact things all at once. You raise the altitude of the conversation. Yes, I did get ChatGPT to help me with that phrase. I was like, what am I raising here? The altitude. I love it. Right? Big picture, sky high altitude. You're no longer stuck in tactical work. You're the one pulling people back to strategy. And immediately you're the strategic thinker. At least that's what it looks like. Even if your brain is in panic mode because you've not spoken up before, right? You're immediately saying, let's align on strategic thinking here. You help to reveal misalignment early. You surface the assumptions before they cost you in execution as a company. You surface the assumptions that mean that you're so focused on this tactical implementation, you've all moved it away from the original problem you were trying to solve 2 weeks ago, or even the beginning of the meeting. You shift the perception of you from being the problem solver to the problem framer. Now, that does not equal being the problem person. That's really, really important. You do not want to have a reputation of the person just solves or just raises problems. That is not what we want. You want to be seen as a solutions person, but we also don't want you to just be the person that solves problems by being solutions. You want to be showing that you know how to frame the problem for the right solution. And that's the shift we're really trying to make. It's a key leadership signal. Because execs don't solve problems, they define the right problems. And actually, they then get the experts in the room to solve the problems. Because as an exec, you are no longer an expert. I don't know if you wanted to hear that, ladies. If you're in middle management right now and thinking, I want to be an exec one day, you are not going to be an expert anymore. You're going to be an expert at being an exec. An exec is responsible for so much. They are not hands on keyboards. I mean, I haven't written a line of code in, I don't know, 10 years. I used to be an expert programmer. I wouldn't have a clue. I could run an engineering team, I think. It's been a while since I've done that as well. Now I'm an executive coach. I'd like to think I could run an engineering team. An engineering executive is not an expert programmer. What they are is an expert at strategic thinking for an engineering team. Those are not the same things. A strategic thinker solves the right problems. They are not experts at the hands-on keyboards. They define the problems. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've ever had the situation where the problem was stated at the beginning of the meeting, or maybe when the original work was scoped, But it's now an hour later, or even months later, maybe, and no one is revisiting the question. Nobody is revisiting the problem you're trying to solve. And you're kind of thinking, why are we even doing this? If that sounds familiar, put a nodding head. It's something like that in the comments. Like, it's so frustrating to me that this happens. I've been in so many meetings, and for a long time, I didn't know how to speak up. So when you ask this question, you're going to calmly, you're going to clearly, without ego, you're saying, let's make sure we're solving something that actually matters. Let's get clear before we get busy. That's senior leadership thinking. That's executive thinking. And here's the bonus. You do not have to be the most senior person in the room to ask this. In fact, you could be quite junior. You don't have to have the answer. You just need the courage to slow the room down and the confidence to speak up. Do you have the confidence to speak up is an interesting question. That's a whole other topic, which I'm not going to get into today. I do have a whole load of tactics for confidence building. Maybe that's the next series. I've got one more in the series for thinking like an exec. And I was like, what's my next series? Is it communication? I don't know. I've got like 5 series I want to do, and it's going to be a whole year, I think. But one of them I think is leadership confidence. And I have a whole confidence training program because I do think it's a huge part of what holds us up, right? A huge, huge part. So I want you to ask yourself, where could you ask this question next week? Where? Or maybe today. What conversation are you going to have where things feel murky, misaligned, or fast moving without clarity? I want you to identify that. I want you to be thinking. And by the way, if you've got questions as we're going along here, please put them in the comments. I will try and get to any questions we have while we're live if we don't run out of time. But I also try and answer any that I don't get to, or you send me in a DM. If it's a private thing, send it to me in a DM and I'll try and answer you privately. I really want to unstick you. Use me where you've got me. You've got me for basically another 15 or so minutes, maybe a bit longer. Use me where you've got me. I'm an executive coach. Tap my knowledge. I'm very, very happy to help. This is why I do these Friday sessions. I'm so passionate about it. If you're feeling like you're always reacting, always solving, always doing, I want you to really lean into this question. I want you to really lean into where can you build an opportunity to ask this question? Because it's how you're going to move from thinking like a fixer, not just being seen as a fixer, but thinking like a fixer, and start being the shaper. And I know what else I love to do with this question, and it works all the time, is I use this at every single level. I use this question with my team, and I think it sets you apart, not just in senior meetings, but with everything. If you are asking your team this, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? More important, you should know what problem you're trying to solve as a team, but sometimes asking the question of your team highlights if there's alignment, misalignment. Are they thinking the same way you are? Using it all the time is just going to make you more in tune with what's needed in the organization. It is going to make sure you and your team are doing really high quality work, not because you're working harder, but because you're doing the right work. It's so powerful with peers, with your team. Asking this question at every level shifts everything in the company to be more strategically aligned. And hey, there isn't a company on the planet that can do a bit more strategy, in my opinion. So now we've talked about the question the great leaders ask. What one problem are we actually trying to solve here? I want that imprinted in your brain. How do you actually use it in a real situation, especially if you're not that senior person in the room? Let's go through this briefly. Okay. First of all, frame it with context. You don't want this to feel like a challenge. You want it to feel like leadership. Here are some ways to kind of ease it into a conversation. Before we go too far, can I pause just for a second? I want to make sure we're aligned on the problem we're solving here. Or, I'm wondering, do we all see the core issue in the same way? Or another one, can we take 60 seconds to define the problem clearly so we know we're solving the right thing? So here's a cool thing to do. If you work remotely, have those written down. I've got them written down, so I made sure I said the right ones, right? Have it written down, have it under your camera. So when you're speaking, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is a great one if you're lacking confidence. And I know at least one person has voted for a confidence group of sessions. That's great. It's lovely to hear, by the way. But it's great if you're lacking confidence because, as I said, when you lack confidence, when you're the only room in the room, your IQ literally drops. And to get that back, you need to build back your confidence. To get your IQ back, to get clarity of thought, you need to build back your IQ. A great way to do it is have those sentences written out so they're go to. So you're not reinventing the wheel while your brain's going, oh my God, I'm going to speak up and I don't feel comfortable, right? Have them written out. These phrases signal alignment, not disruption. They're going to create space for clarity, including for you. So just do yourself a favor and have it written. When I used to work in person in an office in an old-fashioned notebook, I'd have them written down at the beginning. I learned this a long time ago. I'd have them written down on the first page of my notebook. And I'd just like have a quick peek. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Okay, this phrase works in this situation. It's a great tactic to just level you up when you're in a vulnerable place. Okay, step 2 though, you want to use variations that fit your style. If what problem are we trying to solve feels too direct for the culture of the company or for your voice, play around with some alternatives. Something like, can we quickly clarify the root issue here? What's the biggest risk we're trying to prevent? What are we solving for and what would success look like? Are we treating the symptom or the cause? Those are all trying to get at the same thing. Now, you have to make sure it is appropriate. Talking about risks when risks are irrelevant is not helpful. When we're talking about symptom or cause, you need to know what the thing is that we're talking about. So there's a bit more thinking here, but it might be that those phraseologies are more clarifying on what you're trying to get at when you say, what's the problem? Right? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Have an idea of like the root cause issue and how the different ways you are able to frame that. It's a great thing, again, to just a little bit of prep work, just 2 minutes before the meeting. If you know the topic of the meeting, ask yourself, what phraseology could I use to bring them back on point halfway through? They're all going to achieve the same outcome, but you need to pick what feels neutral, what feels natural, what feels aligned with the situation at hand. And then my third step, pair it with a great strategic follow-up. Once you've asked the question, do not leave it hanging. This is where you step into your strategic voice. You're going to follow up with questions like, is that the most urgent problem right now? What makes the right thing to tackle today? I love to ask my team, what is the one thing we need to do first to make everything else unnecessary or easier? Some variation of that. That is from a book called The One Thing, by the way. What is the one thing you need to do first to make everything else unnecessary or easier? That's a really great way of kind of being strategic in how you're executing a list of tasks. And then another one would be, how does this tie back to our Q3 priorities? You're bringing people back to a strategic thinking point. Or what happens if we don't solve this? I love that question because I like to ask, like, what are the costs of not doing this? I think we spend too much time fixing things that shouldn't actually be fixed or aren't a good use of our money or resources or time or effort, and we will end up overworking. I think it's really good to ask the negative question, which is, what happens if we don't do this? What's the cost? I think too much of the time, cost benefit analysis is all about the benefit and not the cost of not doing it. These questions are questions execs need to think about all the time. And when you start doing this, you're going to signal you're not just a contributor, but you're an executive who's guiding. By the way, that applies before you get the executive title. You get the executive title because you are acting as an executive, not because somebody just decides there's a hole at the top that needs filling. You do not get to be an executive unless they see executive material. It is definitely not one of those jobs you just get. You really have to show you're doing it because it's so risky to a company to promote an executive because you have so much to do, right? And when you ask these questions, you are therefore more promotable, not less. In fact, the Harvard Business Review literally calls it the curiosity advantage. You get promoted because you're curious. You're not just helping the team solve a problem, you're helping them choose the right problem to solve. That's true leadership. That's true executive behavior. And it's not just helping the team solve a problem, you're helping them move forward as an organization, as a cohesive unit. You're helping them get alignment. You can use this in performance conversations with directs. You can use this in prioritizing with a peer. You can use this in decision making with your boss. You can actually ask your boss, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because I don't feel like we're aligned here, right? Even use it with yourself. Wait, what problem am I trying to solve? Why am I sending this email? Why am I writing this plan? Why am I writing this project? Honestly, it's a game changer because the minute you get clear on the problem, everything else gets easier. Your communication, which we've already talked about in a couple of episodes ago, your decision making, which we're going to talk about in 2 weeks, execution, influence, clarity is leadership currency. And this question helps you build it. I deal with this all the time. It's a muscle that we develop, and it's about asking these questions, about building that trust, having an ability to track our own impact, and using that to change the perception of you over time. So I'd love to know in the comments, what meeting are you going to try using this in? Tell me a meeting, the name of a meeting, what's coming up. Ideally, one today. I would love it if you did this today, if you still got some meetings left. I know it's Friday. If you still got some meetings left, where are you going to ask this question? I don't care what level the meeting is at. Where are you going to ask this question? If it's next week, pick a meeting. I want you to pop in the comments and tell me, what meeting are you going to try this in? And before we wrap up, I'd love to know if you've got any questions about this. Drop in any questions you have. And as I said earlier, if you have something that's a bit, I don't want to ask that in public, that's fine. Just drop me a question in the DMs and I'll get back to you later on, or maybe over the weekend, we'll see. And if you're watching on replay, by the way, drop the word clarity if this has helped you think differently about how you lead in meetings. I really want to hear whether this has hit the mark today, because I feel like it sounds so simple, and yet I really struggle to get people to change this. It might be that you're like, yeah, I get it, but what's the but? Is it, I don't know how to ask that question? Is it that you're fearful? What's the but? I've got one person at least who's like, she's going to do it in her next one-on-one. Amazing. Thank you. That's so good to hear. If there's a but, I can do this, but, or I'd like to do this, but I understand the question, but what is the but that you're telling yourself? That's my job right now. My job is to understand that but and get you unstuck. I want every single one of you unstuck, because otherwise I haven't done my job. All right. Somebody is telling me managers meeting tomorrow. Excellent. I'm loving that. Loving hearing that. Okay. Let's recap where we are. We name that trap so many of us fall into, being the doer instead of the definer of the work. We've talked about the one question, what problem are we actually trying to solve, and it immediately shifts the perception of you in the workforce. And then hopefully we've talked about some practical ways to really bring it into our one-on-ones, to our meetings, even with ourselves, the different phraseology for the same kind of question. And learning to use that to also up-level your confidence by giving yourself something to practice with that's predefined, that's going to make you look good, is genuinely helpful to the organization, but doesn't require you to be thinking really hard when you're in a bit of a panicky situation. Because the more you do that and realize I'm okay, the more your confidence is going to go up. Confidence doesn't come from some magic mindset work. Mindset work helps, but confidence comes from taking action and thinking, look, I'm okay, right? It genuinely comes from realizing you're okay, you're safe. So here's what I want you to take away. You don't need a promotion. You don't need a new title to be seen as strategic leader. You need to speak like one. And that starts by asking better questions, the kind that raise the altitude in the room that you're in. Before the weekend, as I said, pick one meeting on your calendar, write the question in your notes. What problem are we solving? Use it. DM me later. I want to hear how it lands. I want to hear what happens. The good, the bad, the ugly. Tell me it all. And if you're thinking, this sounds great, but I forgot to do it in the moment, that's exactly where I help, by the way. Like, my goal is to help women get unstuck without adding more to the plate. It's about rewiring how we show up so it becomes natural. I've got 2 resources for you I'd love to share. Some of you might already have got these, but just a reminder, the Promotion Readiness Scorecard. I've had some amazing feedback from this. It's just a trial thing at the moment, so any feedback is very valuable to me. But the goal here with this is it's a way for you to spot the exact strategic visibility and influence gaps that might be holding you up from your next step, even if you're overperforming. And I've also got a PDF that's high stakes communication scripts. This is a guide to help you learn how to speak up, to advocate for yourself, sound more like a decision maker in the moments that really matter. If you want either of those, just DM me with the word scorecard or script, or both if you want both. I'll get them right over to you. And don't miss the next live session in 2 weeks. We are meeting again 2 weeks' time to talk about, you've got the seat at the table, now what? Same time, same place, 2 weeks today, and we're going to go through what happens after you get in the room, that unspoken set of rules, the mindset shift, the communication style that will keep you there and make sure your voice shapes what happens next. I'll see you then, same time, same place. And if today landed, drop a comment, send me a message, tag a woman in tech who needs to hear this. Because after all, when one of us rises, every single one of us rises. I'll see you soon.